Hello, everyone, and welcome to EVTN News. Today, I have a lot of stories about the LMNOP stuff, so we will just jump right into it. So, the first story is from Father James Martin. He posted a tweet this past week, and um, it said, "Honored to co-author this essay with this or on the synod with." And Agbonki. All right, anyway, it's a Jesuit. It's a Jesuit from Africa, a distinguished African theologian and synod delegate. The quote is: "We cannot deny the reality of LMNOP relationships as integral to the meaning of the church, as integral to the meaning of the church as the people of God. We cannot deny the reality as integral to the meaning of the church." Okay, so he says that basically he implies that LMNOP relationships are integral to the church. This James Martin with an African Jesuit, African theologian, clearly not. Um, but this is disgusting. Um, of course, you say Africa will save the church. All right, see what happens later on here, and tell me what you think. All right, moving to Spain, Cardinal Jose Cobo of Madrid has rebuked two priests who publicly campaigned not to follow the LMNOP blessings document. Cobo said that they can express their opinion, but never in civil spaces on internet sites that have nothing to do with the ecclesial dynamic, and which, in the final analysis, are contrary to the ordinary doctrine of Francis. Okay, the Francis Church has its own doctrine. As you know by now, very clearly it has its own doctrine. And so the bishop has to criticize his priests for disagreeing with the new doctrines of Pope Francis. He announced they would fully apply Francis's perversion of the Catholic faith with the intensity that the document deserves and demands. And whoever disagrees, I invite them to read it. Which, I mean, they would have read it if they're criticizing it. I mean, they're not going to just want to, they're going to read the relevant parts and criticize it appropriately as it deserves. He reminds the clergy that they have an oath of fidelity to the Pope, which is not true. So he doesn't look like he threatened them to maybe suspend them or anything, but he criticized them. And I don't think that any bishops have threatened penalties on their priests who refuse to bless an LMNOP couple yet. Definitely, I will report on that if it happens, because I think it's probably a matter of time. And in Ireland, LMNOP concubines cannot be refused a blessing by a Catholic priest, Archbishop Dermot Farrell of Dublin told the Irish Times. Farrell repeated Tucci's nonsense that these were non-liturgical blessings which neither endorse nor justify the situation in which these people find themselves. He said, I welcome the declaration and subsequent clarification which will help us to minister to our brothers and sisters who long for the closeness and compassion of God. So he said they cannot be refused, but he doesn't say what will happen if they refuse it. So there's some tough talk, but no talk of penalties at this point, at least as far as I can see. So then we move on to Africa, and it's a matter of time, I think, just because this is new, and Father James Martin's doing his thing. Of course, he blessed publicly. Well, he blessed an LMNOP couple and posted a photo of it on Twitter the day the document came out. So he probably had an idea that this was going to happen, and yeah. So, okay. And the news about Africa is that Africa won't implement the LMNOP propaganda piece Fiducia Supplicans, says Cardinal Fridolin Ambongu of Kinshasa, Congo, and president of the African Bishops' Conferences, he said on January 11th. So prior to that, he had recommended that the Africans release a statement, like a state. He recommended that the Africans release a single statement together. The African bishops' conferences, or the African bishops, and clearly he was getting directions from the Vatican. So the position of the African bishops has been approved. Well, I mean, I'm not going to put it in quotes. It's been approved by both Francis and Kissy. From now on, Catholic doctrine and practice won't depend on scripture and tradition, but on geographic longitude. So this sort of deviates from, yeah, I mean, it's sort of a deviation from other bishops' conferences. Of course, different bishops or many bishops are reacting very differently to all of this, and it's sort of Francis has made a mess, like he's telling people to do. If an African priest goes to work in the United States or Europe, he could suddenly be forced to do what is forbidden in Africa. Now, Mbongo writes, W-R-I-T-E-S, that rites, R-I-T-E-S, and prayers that blur the definition of marriage are considered unacceptable. But once he is in Rome, these rites are no longer unacceptable. So the key part of the text that I see is this part. They said, "We, the African bishops, do not consider it appropriate for Africa to bless LMNOP unions or LMNOP couples because in our context, this would cause confusion and would be in direct contradiction to the cultural ethos of African communities." So what they're saying here is that it's a cultural thing. It goes against African culture, and so they're not going to do that. And of course, if you're looking at it that way, yeah, Vatican II always talks about enculturating things. So I'm sure the Vatican said, "Oh yeah, that's fine in your variation of your culture, maybe." And I mean, really, if you think about it, yeah, because LMNOP activity is criminalized in some of these countries. And so, yeah, obviously they can't bless it, but you shouldn't bless it anyway, right? So, I'm reading the full statement. I'm not going to read the full statement, but I'm reading through it right now. And it's so that part is very concerning. The Vatican made a concession because of cultural, concerns. So if a culture isn't opposed to sin, then can they bless LMNOP couples? Apparently they can, because Father James Martin did it, and the Vatican didn't criticize them. Kissy actually was more critical of the bishops who opposed the document. Actually, no, not more critical. He was critical. He wasn't critical of priests and bishops who allowed this. Okay, so also another sentence here, I think this is really important. Right after that, the cultural ethos thing would be in direct contradiction. Okay, the language of fiducia supplicans remains too subtle for simple people to understand. Okay, so they're saying it's against. We oppose it because it goes against African cultural values, and the people are too dumb to understand it. Oh, sorry, I'm probably too dumb to understand it too, as is every Catholic, because it's not Catholic. It goes against the faith. So this is where they're getting the agreement with Francis and Kissy, because they're saying, okay, it goes against cultural values and the people are too stupid to understand it. So there you go. The Africans are too dumb to understand it. All right. And people are celebrating it. Just Read the document. read the African opposition document. I fast forwarded or scrolled through to the concluding statement. Read the concluding statement and tell me what you think. So this isn't the resistance that people were expecting from Africa. It's a concession, more or less, that the Vatican it's a negotiated agreement, basically. Basungu is a Vatican insider, and so he wanted all the bishops to release a collective statement, and they did, and which is unfortunate because if you have bishops outright rejecting the document and saying it's heretical and LMNOP relationships cannot be blessed, that would be a Catholic statement, but the Vatican doesn't want that, and so we're getting garbage like this, and people are celebrating it just because confusion, right? Ambiguity. This is an ambiguous statement. But you know, when you get news entities like LifeSite News saying this is a big win, Africans reject the document, like, yes, but they went about it in a sneaky way. I mean, it's kind of like Ecclesia Dei. You got to say it up front. Ecclesia Dei was a sneaky document. You can't really claim otherwise. It talks about the new doctrines of Vatican II. It mentions the new doctrines of Vatican II. What do you think? That's very much off topic. I have a few more news stories, but none relating to this LMNOP document. So I sort of wanted to take a quick pause and, and just kind of mention that this was snuck through very, very quickly. It wasn't snuck through. This was released very quickly. They're moving full speed ahead at this point. Kissy was appointed to the CDF, DDF, whatever you want to call it. And he just went full speed ahead. He acknowledged that those in adulterous marriages, relationships, I guess, because invalid marriages, adulterous relationships, whatever, he acknowledged that they can receive communion, which was the goal of Amoris Laetitia, and a few people still pretend like that's not the case. But it is, and he acknowledged that. He affirmed that. So what's next on the list? What's next on their list? They're going to move forward very quickly. Kissy said that he would release a document that includes surrogacy and gender identity, which is going to be an absolute disaster for the Vatican, even if they try to defend Catholic teaching on the issue, which I'm not very optimistic in that regard. But so that's what's next on the radar. But I also wanted to open up for your opinions. What do you think the Vatican will try next? I think women's ordination is going to be next. There will be something. I mean, I don't have any inside information, but you can see where things are going, and the women ordaining women to the diaconate, or at least creating some kind of ministry, I think will be next. And I thought it could be maybe around October, but now the way things are moving forward so quickly, I don't think they're going to wait until the Synod. I think they're going to release it earlier, and then the Synod's going to do something really crazy, heretical, unless Francis dies. So that would be my prediction. Again, I'm not an expert. I don't have any inside information, so take it as you will. But I also wanted to know your thoughts. What do you expect to happen next? What's the next big thing to happen? Will Humanae Vitae be undermined or overturned? I don't know. Okay, so I'm not done with the LMNOP blessings. I didn't read far enough. Okay, so there's one more piece of news. According to a report in the Italian newspaper Il Messaggero, the Archpriest of St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, Cardinal Mauro Gambetti, has stated that the blessings of LMNOP couples could happen there. He said, to show the world the maternal face of the Church, and along the lines of what Pope Francis has asked for, he said. I guess that was his reason. However, he added that as yet nobody has asked the canons of the Basilica for such a blessing. Well, that seems like an open invitation for someone like James Martin to come prancing in and bring his friends on an LMNOP pilgrimage to the Vatican and have spontaneous blessings that he told everyone about. And so I would imagine that that's going to happen. First you have Pachamama, and now you have LMNOP blessings. It'll happen, and there will be lots of photographers around, and they may even get a certificate, who knows. They may even be able to pre-schedule it, although it's spontaneous. So they tell the priest, come here, I'll be here with my boyfriend, and anyway. Okay, what's next? Oh, Francis, okay. Pope Francis said in a private meeting, he said, I thank you for your commitment to dialogue. His meeting was on January 10th was with 15 representatives of Transversal Dialogue Project, an association of Europe leftist politicians and academics that seeks to bridge Catholic social teaching and Marxist theory. So he met with Marxists. He said, there is always a great need for dialogue, so do not be afraid, highlighting the nexus between social, economic, and ecological issues. The Pope said that politics is truly at the service of humanity and cannot let itself be dictated by finance and market mechanisms. So, yeah, clearly a socialist idea of economics. And he also said this: don't back off, don't give up, and don't stop dreaming of a better world. For it is in imagination, the ability to dream, that intelligence, intuition, experience, and historical memory come together to make us be creative, take chances, and run risks. And that's all the papacy has been in the last 11 years, is risks, taking chances, and they've been epic failures. And he said, don't stop dreaming of a better world. Well, we're not stopping. Don't stop dreaming of a better church. It's kind of what happens every day. We want to get some better leaders in the church, and we want better masses, better Latin masses. Well, more Latin masses. Okay, and of course, Francis. In Italian television interview, he said, what I'm about to say is not a dogma of the faith, but something I hold personally. I like to think that hell is empty. I hope that's the reality. And so it's sort of like the von Balthasar reasonable hope that all are saved. But he said it's not a dogma of the faith, and I wish he would say that before everything that he says. Everything in the last 11 years, he should have included that line in front of it. What I'm about to say is not a dogma of the faith. That should be added to everything that he's said in the past 11 years, because certainly he's a candidate for the worst pope in the history of the church. It's very sad. Good evening. Then next, okay, I think maybe pivot to female ministry or immigration, then next year go back to rainbow stuff. This Pope Francis have the coconuts bless them himself, or will he just let other minions take the blame for it? Oh, he's not going to do it himself right away. I'd be surprised. Anti-racism is always another option for the Marxists to explore. That's an interesting topic, but I think, see, they're not focused on the Latin Mass. I think they could have cracked down a little bit more if they wanted to. I mean, well, they could have outright tried to ban it, which it wouldn't work with the SSPX, but I don't know if this year, so let this be known, there were permissions given in many diocesan parishes to have Latin Masses. These permissions are going to be expiring very soon, and they will not be renewed by the Vatican. So we're going to hear about Latin Masses being shut down. People will show up one week and say, well, this is last Latin Mass. Sorry, next week it's canceled. And that's going to happen probably in the spring quite frequently. It's very evil. But I think they're kind of, it's a soft ban. Because then, they already cracked down, they had the initial crackdown and said, okay, we're banning Latin Masses in a lot of, like, in parish churches, okay, and then the parish churches were requesting an exemption, and they got their 2-year extension, and then now it's going away. So the good bishops are making it work, and the bad bishops are just hands off. And that's what it's going to be. So that's another thing that we're going to see. I don't know if there will be direct attacks on the Latin Mass, but certainly the goal is to purge Latin Masses from the diocesan priests, so the diocesan priests don't say any Latin Masses, and they aren't influenced by that rigid stuff. Although that's not going to happen, because most diocesan priests, especially the ones who say the Latin Mass, almost all of them are going to live longer than Pope Francis, and maybe their next pope will be less hostile towards the Catholic faith. So, okay, well, that is it for this week. And until next time, thank you so much for watching. We are the laity, and we will not be silent.